Hello everybody and welcome to this video. It's not a controversial thing to say that the vast majority of Swift developers, of us, like people that it's interested in Swift, it's because iOS development. Maybe macOS or any other platform from Apple. But it's really important to remember and always keep in mind that Swift is bigger than that. Another aspect where Swift is really useful is on the backend, to build servers, to make server-side applications. So today I want to show a little appreciation to the Swift Server Working Group. Today we're gonna take a look at the Swift Server Working Group accomplishments. So let's get started. The Swift Server Working Group is a steering committee. It makes sure that the Swift development doesn't forget the server. The server it's quite different from front-end applications, so they require some things that it's better to have a committee for. It's one of the biggest priorities of this working group, making sure that the community focuses on what really matters instead of duplicating the effort on many ways. One interesting thing, and it's really important, is that this is made, yes, from people from Apple, but also members of the community. If you have been using Vapor, for example, Vapor is part of this. Like all these big frameworks like Kitura and Vapor that we are using, they all fit into this working group. So it's not like there is one person or one company deciding what needs to happen. One of the bigger things that happened last year for the server working group was the incubation process. They designed this process in a similar way that Swift Evolution in order to make sure that packages had a chance to become a recommended official package of the server working group. There is different process, and even once you are accepted, there are regular reviews to make sure that the quality keeps being what is expected from an official recommendation. And they also provide guidelines about how to work with concurrency or testing or even the style of the code. The more common these things are between all these packages, the easier it's going to be for the community to keep moving them forward. And the interesting thing is that you're probably using packages that came up from this process because things, as I said, like Kitura and Vapor and all these web frameworks are using under the hood packages that came up from this incubation process. So last year there were 9 packages that came out of this. So let's take a look at them to see what directions server working group is taking. The first one, and probably the one that most people know of, is Swift Neo. This was internally developed by Apple and made open source when they decided to show their own focus into the server ecosystem. And it's basically a network application framework. It's kind of what for a front-end developer will be using NSURL session. For backend, Swift Neo covers all those necessities in terms of the server perspective. So the framework is non-blocking and event-driven, which makes it a high-performance framework, which is crucial for the server-side development when you need to handle so many client requests per second. This is super crucial for this framework. And it already has implementations of SSL, HTTP2, WebSockets, TLS. So basically everything that you need to start a web server, you have it ready with Swift Neo. SwiftLog is the first of these package APIs. SwiftLog is a logging API. It doesn't have concrete implementations. I mean, it has one, but it's basically like a really basic one. But the important thing is that this is a package that defines an API. From your application, you're going to be using this package as just an API. You're going to be calling the methods provided by this package, and then you can use other packages and other frameworks that provide the different compatible backends. Another one of these package APIs is this metrics API. It's exactly the same as logging, but for metric. It has APIs to report structured metrics like gauges, timers, counters, and many more. It's super useful because once you reach a level in the server development, you really want to keep track of what's happening on your server, and having metrics on top of logs, it's really, really useful. Another important theme on server-side packages is database drivers. The first one that came up for Swift from this incubation process is the Postgres Neo. It's a Postgres database driver built on top of Neo, which already gives the non-blocking event-driven, which is like a high-performance driver for a super common database. After that, we had Redis Stack, which is a Redis client in a similar vein as Postgres, but for Redis, also built on top of SoftNeo. Now, instead of talking about an HTTP server framework, this is an HTTP client framework. It's still, you are able to use it on the server to communicate with other servers, but this deals with the client side of the connection. This is again also based on Swift Neo, so non-blocking, event-driven, all of that. And it's a direct replacement with higher performance than curl in Linux mainly, but you can also use this instead of URL session. This framework deals with common things like streaming HTTP bodies, or even dealing with proxying and redirection, decoding cookies, all that stuff that is common in any HTTP client. Another interesting framework and super concrete and super useful for iOS developers is the APNS Swift. This basically implements APNS in Swift on top of Swift Neo. It handles all the connections, all the payload encodings, the JWT, the SSL stuff, like it's complete. It handles everything that you expect from a library that is working with APNS, which is really, really useful. StatsD client, it's one of these backends that we were talking. In this case, it's a backend for metrics. I'm not an expert on this protocol, but it's just a package that implements this protocol. So any other server tooling that can read from this protocol, basically your server can communicate with them. Prometheus, it's another one of these quite common and famous tools on the server ecosystem. This a Prometheus library for a Swift backend. It's another one of these metric backends that's really important, and you can see that already. Once you have the basic metrics API, then anybody can come and implement more backends and more backends to support all the amount of products that the server ecosystem has. So those were all the 9 packages that came out from this incubation process last year, but they also made big improvements in terms of tooling. I still remember when Swift came out. Yes, it ran on Linux, but it was a little pain. Now, like, we have official Docker images, even distributed via Docker Hub, which is what everybody uses basically. So these images are based on Ubuntu. It's important that we just not have one. We actually have, for every new version of Swift, these Docker images are updated. And even more interestingly, if you have a complex distribution of Docker images built on top of each other and that kind of stuff that people does with Docker, you can actually use some slimmed images. They are images that only have the absolutely required libraries to make Swift work. Swift Backtrace, it's a library that helps get better backtrace support when there is a crash on Linux. Kind of never been a problem when you are working with macOS, but as soon as you move that code and you use it in Linux and there is a problem there and the crash, kind of you don't have any output from it, it was really difficult to debug this kind of. Swift Backtrace tries to help with that. It's using a C library to hook into the process systems, and then it's using a private Swift runtime API to actually demangle the names of the functions and to know the exact stack trace. There is a Swift proposal to actually make this demangle function publicly on the runtime. Finally, one minor thing, but what's super important when you are taking server development seriously for any language, it's to get quick patch updates. The security is way more important in a server. That's why having monthly patch updates for Linux, it's huge. When people find issues and crashes and stuff like that, in the best of cases, they only have to wait for a month. They don't have to wait for a big, huge next release, or like us on the front end, we need to wait for a new version of Xcode and that the App Store support it, all that stuff. These guys on Linux for the server, they actually take care of getting monthly updates out, which is super important, and it shows the appreciation that they actually taking seriously the server development. So that's all the accomplishments they have been had. Like, they are not a small amount of them. It's really huge what they have been doing. So we should really appreciate all this effort and all this focus and with the willingness to make Swift on the server a real candidate that people can actually consider before anything else. But the road, it's long and it's ahead of us. So what's coming on 2020? Plenty of things, of course. First of all, we need more database drivers. MongoDB, MySQL, all this stuff is already in progress, but like it needs to go through the incubation, all of that stuff to make an official recommendation from the server working group. Distributed tracing, it's kind of the missing leg. We have logging and we have metrics reporting. Now we need the tracing, which is the three pillars of observability, which is crucial, as I said, for a backend environment where you want to know what's going on your server. Connection pooling is something that different libraries are implementing on their own, and there are conversations going on about if it's worth having a common package, a common API across all of them to reuse the benefits and bug fixes and all that stuff of having a single common code base. OpenAPI, it's something that also everybody on the server is kind of using, so it's really important that Swift also takes part of that. More Linux distros. Every time that we say that Swift works on Linux, yes, it works on Linux, but like officially only Ubuntu is supported. So it's really nice that they are thinking of opening this more and actually taking a look at which distros are worth supporting and actually supporting it, building probably Docker images with them and having them on the CI to make sure that everything works, all that kind of stuff. And then we go into a more less technical side of things. We need to start having better documentation, especially around deployment guides, because it's the first challenge that you get when you are working on the server. It's really nice that you can open Xcode and start working with Swift Neo or Kitura or any of these packages. Everything is super integrated, super easy to debug, and then you have your application and how do you distribute that? So it's really nice that this is one of the focus for this year. And also, people keeps asking, but is Swift in the server a reality? It's somebody using it in production? And the answer is yes, many people. So what Swift needs to do is some better way of showcasing all these examples of people that is actually using this in production. So that's been a recap of what the Swift server working group has accomplished in the past year, which has been huge. Thank you to all of them for making Swift the reality on the server. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you very much and see you next time.